Oh my gosh, that's a good point.
Oh no. Well, we're live.
Hey.
Well, that's how we do it. So,
Like that. You gotta keep going.
so hi, like any other show, I tend to have tech issues. I swear someday I'm gonna get a new computer, and we'll make that happen. But until then, welcome to Voices of Color. For those of you who are just joining or have joined for the first time, this really is a way for people of color in the SCA to share their experiences as people of color, because our experiences don't end at the gate. This Voices of Color is not endorsed by or affiliated with the Society for Creative Anachronism Incorporated. The views of the host and guests do not represent the views, values, or policies of the SCA Inc. And it's important for us to start every show with that, to let you know that we're stepping into this space authentically with our real selves. We're here as people of color, to really share this time with you as the audience. Another reminder that all of the people that are on the show are volunteers. So people are choosing to come on here and share their stories in the hopes that allies and folks who are listening will be motivated to step up and do the thing, whatever that thing looks like. With me today, I have two lovely co-hosts who I will let introduce themselves.
Would you? Okay. My name is Jessica. I'm Zara in the SCA, and I'm also currently serving as the SCA's DEI officer.
And I'm Gigi. I am a member of the SCA, and I have been since 2010.
And I am over by Gigi's. So
yeah, we're
you get us both.
This is double trouble, and I feel like this is a setup. I'm just not sure what kind yet. We'll see. And for folks who don't know me, my name is Genevieve in the SCA, Nina outside of the SCA, and I'm your I'm your host for the evening. Joining us today is Roberto. Unfortunately, I neglected to put your full name down on paper so I could actually attempt to say it. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself and head the show. This is your time. This is your time to speak with allies, your time to be your authentic self, and we're along for the ride. And based on the pre-interview, this will be an epic ride. So here we go. Roberto, take it away.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Hello, Internet. Hello, Facebook. And thank you for having me, folks. My full SCA name is Roberto José Alfonso Cayetano de San Fernando Toledo Ruiz y Escalente. Nice to meet you all. I am in the Middle Kingdom. Currently, I am His Majesty Uller Amaranson's Armored Champion. Currently live in the Barony of the Flame, which is in Louisville, Kentucky, but I got my start in the SCA in Columbus, Ohio.
Roberto, we're having some tech issues.
Yeah, you sound like a transformer at this point.
I mean, it's kind of cool, but
Barony of the Middle Marches. My primary interest is armored combat. Of course, I have a lot of fun with it, but I've also done getting into fingers crossed teaching in the SCA at some point. Oh no. Quick change of area and I'll be right back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you hear me?
We'll keep it going.
I like how that tech issue played out as like a like it got there.
Yeah. I'm excited to see you both together in the same space. I feel like the forces have multiplied. Like it's the like Power Ranger rings that you put together. I used to watch them as children. It's whatever. But like the powers are multiplied by having you both in the same room.
Hey, folks, I'm back. Hopefully, I'm at a better place.
Hey.
Apparently, I was in a dead spot Wi-Fi wise, so I'm hopefully in a better spot, more stable connection. Sorry to interrupt. Where did you lose me?
Halfway
So we
through your
heard it
name.
all. It just took like 5 minutes to come through.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we
Okay.
got through your intro. Perfect.
Okay. Good. Yeah, no. Sorry about that, folks. Hopefully now this shouldn't happen. So here we go.
You sound way
like-
better.
It's
Good.
like
I'm glad. So yeah, no, where do we want to start? Because I'm pretty much an open book tonight.
well, I think one of them was you started to talk about your story, your origin story, kind of. So I don't know if you want to share that and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in the SCA in 2015. That's pretty much when I moved to Ohio for grad school. So I am born and raised in Puerto Rico. 23 years of my life, I did my undergrad there. And then I came to Columbus, Ohio for grad school, which is where I found the SCA. I heard the story of like, hey, do you like sword fighting and do you like wearing armor? Yes, of course, right? And that's where I found the SCA, and that's where I kept going. What's interesting is that Puerto Rico doesn't have an SCA presence, like at all. So what's interesting about that is this was completely new, completely unheard of. I had heard of like Ren fairs and LARPing before, but never really in any serious capacity, because that's just not a thing that we do in the island, right? So when I found it, I dove head first and I really went with it to the point where my first event, a count by the name of Nikolai, he was king at the time, and I went to my first event when he was king, and I told him after the event, like, excuse me, Your Majesty, or I didn't call him Your Majesty at the time because I didn't know the titles, but such is the life of the new person. So I went to him and I said, excuse me, Your Majesty, this is all new. The folks back home have no idea what this is. They don't believe me. Would it be possible to maybe get a selfie together to actually prove that this is a thing? And Nikolai, he was on it, and he said, let me get my good crown. So he got his really fancy and in his words, mustered his best high school Spanish and wrote "Yo soy el rey," which is Spanish for "I am the king." And we had a selfie, and that was my first event. And it was a grand old time. Actually, that's the SCA is where I met my partner. We're married now. My partner Abigail Artemisia in the SCA. It's been a fundamentally life-changing experience to be in the SCA, and it's been for the better, I would say.
So of course I'm having unmute problems now that you've solved your streaming problem.
We're doing it live.
Like, I'm still, what was it like to move to Ohio from, I'm just like picturing you said Puerto Rico for 23 years and then you moved to Ohio?
Yeah.
Like,
so
how
I
does
moved to
that
Ohio.
work?
I originally, so when I was in my undergrad, I was doing my degree in sociology and getting getting a second major in philosophy. And my professor, who was kind of like my mentor at the time, he said, listen, there's these research internship programs that they do in like the big 10 universities in the Midwest. Try it out, see what you think. And I said, all right, cool. It's a summer. They pay me to do it, which is great. And I went with it, and I really liked going to Ohio. I actually enjoyed it, which I know might be hard to believe for a lot of folks who live in Ohio. But what I liked about Columbus was the fact that it was a big enough city where there's a lot to do, but it's small enough that it's not overwhelming like some of the bigger cities in the United States, right? The biggest shift, of course, was the cultural shift, right? Where I now speaking English 24/7 as opposed to being a little bit more bilingual. In Puerto Rico, speaking primarily Spanish. My undergraduate degree in class, it was all in Spanish unless it was a class in English, right? So there was a big language shift. There were many nights where I was actually very tired of speaking English. My brain was just kind of tired. The idea of how Midwesterners interact was something completely new to me. I didn't know what that was like, just in any capacity.
Very unique.
Yes, y'all are.
Well,
And
so I'm in the dark. What does that look like?
Zara, would you like to?
Oh man, I don't want to say it and then get called out by a bunch of Midwesterners.
Okay,
It's kind of a Midwestern politeness, though.
So as a sociologist,
oh,
I want to speak to you, sociologist. It is fascinating to me, the Midwestern culture, because coming from the South, when I went there, I thought they were actually being like hospitable. I thought they meant what they said, but there's like a politeness, but not a warmth. Like it is no, it's their culture. Like when you come to New Orleans and we're like, hey, we're having a party. Do you want to come? Like, we want you to come. In the Midwest, they're like, yeah, let's get together sometime.
The let's get together sometime is definitely a thing.
And you're like, well, when?
Oh, I don't know if it's that bad. There is a very unique kind of language, and there is a lot of hidden intention, right? And there's a lot of couching things in polite tones, right? So that whole like, let me get out of your hair, let me let you go. Like, I'm putting this forward as a favor I'm doing to you, when in reality I'm like, so I want to leave. I want to get off this phone call.
Yeah, and that's the one that I was going to bring up. I'm going to let you go and do that. Where when I say it, it's all right. I can tell that you're busy, but for a lot of folks, I definitely experienced it was I want to be done, but I don't want to tell you that I'm done. Right. And to be clear, right, everybody that I've met has been, whether it's been Midwestern polite or a different form of polite, everybody's been genuinely nice to me, with a few exceptions of folks who aren't in the SCA, so we don't have to worry about that. But it is a cultural shift, right? Something that actually is really interesting is the size of personal space bubbles. So in Puerto Rico, we're closer together, right? Our idea of what is personal space is a little bit smaller. In the Midwest, I remember taking steps towards somebody, getting closer to them as I speak to them, because I want to have that space with them, but I could also see them taking a step back, right? And that's just kind of where there's boundaries are, and that's okay. But it was definitely just a different thing that I had to get used to. Also, I had to get used to, just the idea of drier climates, colder climates, bigger roads, just all that stuff. So much more German, I will say, than Puerto Rico. But it's these different cultural experiences that were pretty cool from a Puerto Rican perspective. A little tiring, because it gets tiring if I speak Spanish most of the time, and then a little bit of English thrown in, to all of a sudden switch it to the other side. It's definitely a mental task, but at first I had much more of a Hispanic accent when I got to Ohio, and over the years people tell me it's gone away a little bit, which is just part and parcel of living in these areas, right?
So I'm just trying to put this in perspective with the Northwest nice that we've talked about before. So that's, for me, it's like orientation to this Midwest nice. How did that all translate to the SCA?
It was actually really interesting, because I found a little bit more direct niceness compared to other areas of Ohio. It was, I mean, look, there were my original group was this incipient group, is now a full status group, which is great. It's called the College of St. Brutus in OSU, Ohio State University. And it's a fantastic group. It's thankfully lived on, and it's growing, and there's folks there, and they're awesome, and they're doing a great job, which is wonderful. But when I started, it was a little bit smaller. There was folks who had come from other groups established in the Columbus area and trying to revive, right, this college group. So it was me and a few other students, and because of recruiting efforts and also genuine, like, hey, these folks are cool, let's keep them in. Folks were more direct, like, hey, if you want to do armoring, this is how we do it, or come to my house, I'll teach you about things, or at the very least, let's catch a movie. After practice, let's go eat something, that kind of stuff. There was an intentional sort of hospitality there that really helped me stick with the SCA through grad school. Because I remember I moved to Ohio for grad school.
Yeah.
So with that, you know, it's interesting. The idea of that Midwestern nice thing that we've been kind of talking about has been a thing that I've spoken to with other Scadians about, because other Scadians, you know, also moved to Ohio, and we had that opportunity to be like, this is weird, right? I'm not the only one that's doing this, right? Like, I'm not reading too much into this. This is happening. But it's been a cool space where we can actually share that sort of cross-cultural experience, which has been really nice.
I will say, I do notice that Midwest Scadians are actually more warm and truly hospitable than actual Midwesterners. So, you know, at Punzik, when I would go to different camps of people from the Middle Kingdom, they were actually genuinely warm. Come on in, you know, we want to share a drink with you. We come sit by our fire. Like, they really were the whole, like, the, you know, the whole way, not just polite, but also warm.
Yeah.
Which is amazing to me, but I think it just speaks to the fact that the SCA is kind of familial, right? We really do treat each other like an extended family, even at major wars where we don't know each other. We pull each other in, even if we're strangers.
Well, I think
and that's really, really cool.
No, keep going, go.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't want to interrupt. But yeah, the idea of, I mean, I am very biased because I think the Middle Kingdom is the best kingdom, and I don't care what you say otherwise. But that's a very personal opinion. That doesn't hold much water. But regardless of that fact, right, there is a genuine kindness with folks in the SCA, and definitely in the Mid-Realm, where there's this like, hey, you want to tell a story? Come on in, right? Bardic circles are really good about that. And there's this, you know, the wonderful thing about the Bardic community is if you have a song and if you have a story that you want to bring, if you want to do a thing, great, come on, let's do it, right? Or with fighting, it's like, hey, I'm new, I'm trying to figure out loner armor and all that jazz. Awesome, let me show you how to throw a shot. You know, so on and so forth, right? To say nothing of, you know, arts and sciences that really genuinely wants to teach you how to sew, which is not something I pictured myself doing, but now I feel comfortable around a sewing machine, which is weird, but very much appreciated, because I feel a lot more comfortable dealing with things like, oh, my jeans ripped, let me just take care of that really quick, you know, that kind of thing. So it's you're right, Gigi. I do appreciate the fact that, you know, the Middle Kingdom and the SCA in general has this ability to bring people in, and I think part of that, you know, sociologically speaking, is this idea that we're all in this constant process of creation, whether it is this, we're telling a story, or we're kind of creating a narrative in our heads for an event, or, you know, the long-standing legacy of DIY culture that the SCA has had since the 60s is wonderful, because, you know, personally, from a fighting perspective, armoring nights where you're in somebody's basement making armor and just chit-chatting and maybe gossiping or just talking about stuff or sharing ideas is one of the more intimate yet, you know, like long-standing moments that I think a lot of people are happy to fall back on and say, like, yeah, this was the thing that really keeps me in the SCA.
So I want to kind of shift gears and talk about the Latin presence in SCA. And I know that's a big shift, but going from Puerto Rico to Ohio and looking at our Latin presence, what can we do better, and what does it currently look like?
Oh man,
loaded questions, totally loaded questions, and I know that. So
no, that's fair. So it's hard, right? Because the SCA, when recruiting Latin folks and Black folks and Asian folks, has to contend with the larger cultural issues about thinking about, right? When we think about medieval history, we tend to European history. And when we think about European history, we tend to think about it as an all-white European history, which is factually not correct, right? We know we have so much evidence to suggest to the otherwise, right? That multicultural societies existed and flourished in various areas of Europe. But not only that, but, you know, the Middle Ages applied everywhere, right? We had Middle Ages everywhere. So that's something that we always have to deal with when it comes to recruitment and retention and stuff like that, right? The idea of having Latino people, Latina people, and Black folks and Asian folks being like, do I see myself as part of medieval history, right? And that's an issue for Latinos, me specifically, right? Because Puerto Rico was a colony of Spain before it belongs to the US, we had that tie there, right? We knew about the history of conquest and colonization that the Spanish empires did, right? We always heard of Christopher Columbus and all that jazz. He never landed in Puerto Rico, but in his journals, he wrote about Puerto Rico, right? So, at the very least, there's some legitimate, there's some tie-in there in being able to see yourself, right? And what's interesting too is that personally, my experience as Latino is not the universal experience, because if you look at me, so when I tell folks that I'm Latino, I've gotten, you don't look Latino, or you don't look Puerto Rican, or you don't sound Latino or Puerto Rican. And I always ask them, like, what does that mean? Right? Just to see them flounder a little bit. But the double-edged sword of that is that, one, if I kind of stay quiet around the SCA experience, I definitely pass off as just another white American, right? Until I tell people my name and I tell people where I'm from, and I actually show them that I'm bilingual and I can switch from English to Spanish really quickly. But overall, from what I've seen about the association, right, we're great about diversity in terms of gender and sexual diversity, and I'm not qualified to talk about ability and national origin status, but I will say that for at least LGBTQ folks, the SCA is a wonderful place to be. But at the same time, racially speaking, many people before I have talked about the struggles about having a different shades of the SCA, which is why we're even doing this program, which, by the way, thank you for doing it. For me, when I'm fighting, I'm always fighting. I've very rarely fought, folks that aren't white. Right. The chivalry of the Middle Kingdom, esteemed as it is, has like 2, 3, like we have very few numbers of Latinos in there. Right. I know that in other kingdoms, there are other Latino fighters and Latino knights and stuff like that, which we should definitely talk about later. But from Latino perspective, it definitely took a little bit of determination and a little bit of hard-headedness on my part to be, like, all right, not many people look like me here or sound like me or have my similar experience. That's fine. I'm going to lean into it and come at it from this perspective. And over the years, I feel like I've gotten more comfortable about being able to actually bring forth that Latino-ness and bring more Spanish into it, bring a little bit more sass. I like being, as folks in the kingdom know, I like being jaunty, but not just doing it with garb, but also doing it with showing up as a cultural inheritor of Caribbean-ness and Latino-ness, right, is something that I want to sort of keep building on and keep bringing forward as the years go by. Hopefully that makes sense, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah. I think, it's difficult. Every time we do this show, I just realize, and I'm sure that everybody else does, there's a lacking presence and then a lacking ability to guide folks who are coming in. I was with my partner who's stepping into one of the social media roles, and we're talking about the plan for social media moving forward. And my very direct question was, so what about the inclusion of people of color? What about the inclusion of LGBTQ? Like, how are we going to do the outreach? Because for me, at some point, I would love to see a range step in and say, we are doing EDI and EDI only, even if it's just we're going to recruit. The one thing we want to do in our reign is recruit new members, because we're going to die off, right? If we don't get new members in, and if we don't diversify what we have, we are going to be stuck in this bubble. And I think having presence, and so whether it's your presence in the chivalry, whether it's presence I'm going to say out and loud and, you know, transparently, if we don't have that, we're not going to succeed.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, we know, like, not only do we know it from experience, but also, thankfully, sociological data does reflect this, right? People tend to join organizations, political parties, you know, larger social groups and movements when they see themselves represented in that movement or group or organization, right? It's just an empirical truth that we have. So yeah, no, being able to recruit is important, and being able to say like, hey, you know, we have folks that look like you, right? We are part of you and you can be part of us, is always an important thing. What's always a tension, and I'm sure that all of y'all have heard it before, right? Is the line of, you know, how do we do that without saying, oh, you're Latino? Hey, talk to Roberto. That's your only sort of guide host, right?
Tokenism?
Yeah, tokenism is a thing. Who knew, right? What? It's like y'all have talked about it or something in your previous episodes.
Never experienced that in my life.
No, never once, never once. And I feel bad, right? Because it's a very quick way for people of color and also women and gender nonconforming folks to really quickly burn out, right? Because they're constantly having to do the recruitment work and the emotional labor that it takes to say like, hey, you know, you look like me and we look like each other, be welcome here. And I think that's a good thing and it's a noble thing, but there's still the physical reality of like, you don't want to be a billboard all the time, right? So it's finding that balance. And as I'm sure you all know, right? I'm
it's
speaking
really
to
hard.
the choir.
Yeah, no, it's a really difficult balance to strike, right? This is a conversation that comes up a lot when we talk about POCs occupying like officer positions, right? Do we demand further emotional labor from people who are already struggling, right? Just dealing with going through day-to-day life, or do we accept that, hey, we should allow our allies, to use the word, to do the work, but then understand that there is every risk that it may not be done as effectively, right? I have talked to groups who wanted to translate brochures into Spanish because they're like, oh, well, we really want to bring in folks who speak Spanish, so we could translate our brochures. And I'm like, that's great. How many Spanish speakers do you have in your group? And they were like, well, none. And I'm like, so what happens when they come to your event and you have effectively promised an experience that you cannot deliver on, right? Like there is a surface level engagement here that I desperately appreciate. I do. Any effort is good effort, but that doesn't mean it's as effective as it could be. And I think that we forget that a lot of times as people of color, right? I know that when I look at a group and I see no other people of color, it's not just, it's why. Yeah. Why aren't there any other people of color here? Because there has to be a reason.
Right.
You know, we live in areas sometimes that are very high populations of people of color, and that it doesn't reflect in our local SCA group. And it's like, why? Why is the case for this? What issues are there here? And it does read that way, even if there aren't any immediate issues to kind of talk about. So yeah, no, it's a very complex issue.
I think that part of that is not playing the tape all the way through, right? Like it's a good idea. Oh yeah, let's translate because we want to recruit, but what are you recruiting to? Do you have the support systems in place to actually welcome these people in and sustain their continued involvement in the SCA? So it's not just about recruiting or translating brochures. It's, do we have an atmosphere that is truly welcoming, that is truly supportive, so that when they come, they will stay? Because if they might come if you have a brochure in Spanish, but they will not stay if you are not holding true to these kind of promises you make with the brochure, and they're not actually included and welcomed and valued. And that's where I think we struggle in the SCA. We have a lot of good intentions, but the intentions sometimes are based on the outward act of recruiting and not the inner act of, when they get here, are we ready to support them?
Right. Because if you're not, then you're going to get one night where somebody walks in and they see that immediately the things are not set up to accommodate them, and they're going to go, okay, well, that was nice, bye, and they're not going to come back. Like, hey,
And
how was your evening? I don't know, a bunch of gringos talked to me about some fighting stuff and it looked cool, but nobody speaks Spanish, so yeah.
and I just want to put a real quick plug for everybody watching this and everybody for the future who will watch this. Do not use Google Translate. Google Translate is not your friend.
No, it is
not your friend. I don't know how many times I can say this to folks. Do not use it. And I think that people want to use what they have on hand, not realizing that just don't.
Right. It's unfortunate because we're banging our heads up against larger systemic issues and we're trying to solve them in our own small way for our organization that we care deeply about, right? And we're having to contend against these larger social forces that are so difficult to navigate. And then, you know, people's thoughts are, okay, what tools do I have? Google Translate, let's do it. But I know when you use Google Translate, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure other folks know too. And you know, some folks have the patience and grace to say, you know what, they're trying, let me just try it as well, let me meet them halfway in the middle. But sometimes folks don't, and that's okay too, because folks are allowed to exist without being catered to and without being sort of token from the get-go, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I did kind of skip over this and we didn't really get to it, but I did want to get back to the you know, idea of white passing, because on the same end of tokenism, you know, Jessica and Gigi know there was a post that I became a little irate about, because what it sounded like they were asking for was not just tokenism, but was colorism and having visible minorities. And I think people forget that we come in all colors, all shapes and sizes. There is no one size fits all. And making the assumption that if you look white, you're white, puts us in a place where people get erased. Erasure of entire cultures, erasure of ethnicities, of languages, of everything. And I wanted to give you a moment to talk about that, because that is something we talked about in our pre-interview and something that comes up a lot.
Yeah. And speak on it. That's all I got to say. No, but in actuality, that's something that even I till today still kind of struggle with, right? When we talk about people of color and voices of color and stuff like that, I really wanted to be part of this project because I'm Latino, and like that, and having the Puerto Rican's perspective is really, should, I think, be really interesting. I feel like we can have meaningful discussion here. But one of the things that I always kind of have difficulty with is being regarded as a person of color, because I don't look like what people expect when they say person of color. Although, right, I'm from the colonies, I am from the Caribbean, like that set of experiences, both economic, cultural, political, so on and so forth, puts me at a place that isn't the Anglo-American experience. It isn't, right? And, you know, growing up in a place where people think is some island paradise as a playground leaves you with certain things, right? Leaves you with certain impressions and ideas. Growing up in an island that doesn't know self-determination. Puerto Rico's never been a country. I don't know what it is to live in an independent country until I moved to Ohio at 23 years old, right? So with that, right, that carries a whole set of baggages of, you know, being somebody of color or being somebody who's marginalized, right, is that experience that goes beyond just phenotypical presentation, right? I think folks unfortunately have a very superficial understanding of race. And, you know, it's not your skin color, right? It's not that, it's the social meaning that gets applied to phenotypical characteristics, right? Race is something that is a social idea, is a process, it's a set of meanings and weights that get added to folks based on what they look like, not what they look like. There's no genetic marker of skin color, right? It's all socially constructed. And just because it's socially constructed doesn't mean there's no weight to it. Quite the opposite. If it's socially constructed, then that means that there's a lot of weight to it. And so, you know, when I tell folks that I'm Puerto Rican, things automatically change, right? I'm hanging out at a bar or at an event or at a whatever function, social function, and everything is fine until I tell folks that I'm Puerto Rican. And most folks, in my experience, have been mostly gracious. Great, wonderful, I love it. But there was a time where I was pulled over, my fault, where the police officer asked to see my driver's license. I gave him my Puerto Rico driver's license because I was fairly new to Ohio at the time. And he saw that I was Puerto Rican and he said, "Where's your green card?" And I'm like, no. Puerto Ricans have been citizens since 1917. Are you sure? Yes, I'm very sure, actually. But it's that immediate sense of otherness that happens, right? I've been questioned on my Puerto Ricanness many a time. I remember in my first time to years and years ago, where I was in Washington, D.C., I was in an elevator and somebody asked where I was from. And I was like, "Oh, I'm Puerto Rican." And they're like, "No, you're not." I'm like, yes, I'm pretty sure that I am, right? It's these little things that create a sense of marginalization. Puerto Ricans, right? Brown Puerto Ricans are marginalized to a different degree than me, for example. But the idea of whiteness is not just the idea of who is white and who is not, right? Because historically speaking, whiteness has been a process of political exclusion in the United States, right? For example, the idea of citizenship in the United States being granted only to white men, that was one of the founding principles of Congress. Who is a citizen, right? So the idea of whiteness has always been this sort of political thing, and being able to be considered white versus not, right, is always politically laden. And when you deal with folks who may be considered superficially white, but have a political experience and have a cultural experience that is one that is subjugated to a larger political power, there is a sense of marginalization right there, and being conceived of as an other has an implication racially, not just culturally and ideologically. So there's a lot of really nuanced stuff going on that I think folks are either not prepared to really discuss, or if they're prepared to discuss it, they unfortunately don't have the conceptual tools to do it, which I don't judge people for, because it's a hard and difficult and nuanced topic to go through. Does that make sense?
Oh, very much.
Okay.
Jessica wants to speak.
So speaking as a person who does a lot of classes that we are tackling more basic concepts, right? We are talking about what privilege is, how it manifests. We're talking about the idea that institutional racism even exists at all. It's very difficult to then move from that to the idea of the fact that, like you mentioned, whiteness has traditionally been gatekept by people who were white, whatever value that was at the time. And the idea of colorism features heavily within almost every region as a result of the colonization and the ideas of whiteness that we discussed previously. And it's hard to introduce that kind of complexity when you're still trying to establish a baseline, like what is privilege? Right. And so people don't necessarily have the toolkit to engage with it. And it puts people who are trying to do education in kind of the space of like, okay, do we play to the basics and we make sure everyone's on the same page before moving on, which means we might not finish the book. And then acknowledge that, hey, we have left some of our people of color at a place of a disservice because we're discussing concepts that are so basic and so ingrained for them that it didn't really even need to be said. But we are at least addressing kind of the majority here. It's a very weird place to be. It's something that honestly, a lot of my close friends, I had a lot of struggles about it, because I'm like, have I only been teaching to this audience, and have I effectively excluded people of color from engaging in the conversations? Which is why I so appreciate that Nina put this together and came forward and said, hey, do you want to be a part of it? Because I'm like, yes, yes, I feel like I have totally not engaged with the complexities and the nuance behind racial equity and a lot of other higher level equity issues.
Yeah, that's definitely a difficult thing to navigate with. And, I one of the things, at least for me, that's been interesting to observe, at least, so for folks who don't know, I teach sociology at the University of Louisville, right? I'm a professor there. I got my PhD over the summer. This is something that I'm very passionate about, but it's interesting. Thank you. But what's interesting to me when I teach on these subjects and non-Canadian students, they're very ready to acknowledge the social construction of gender, right? Heterosexism, heteronormativity, that stuff, right? Very easy for folks to be like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But when we get on race, there's like, wait a minute, hold on. And I haven't gotten explicit resistance to it, but I can tell with observing body language that some folks may be not as comfortable with it, which makes sense, right? One of the, like you mentioned, Sarah, the idea of whiteness being gatekept by white folks who stand to gain from the system at the time is an important facet, right? Cheryl Harris, I don't know if folks know who she is. If you don't know, look her up. She is a UCLA professor. She is one of the founding theorists behind critical race theory. Her and Kimberly Crenshaw are tight. The point is that she wrote in one of her essays called Whiteness as Property, she wrote that, in paraphrasing, that even if poor white folks lose by not being rich white folks, they're still winning in the racial hierarchy because at least they're not Black poor folks, right? And where that comes from is from the sense of status, right? The idea of whiteness being of a higher racial status than Blackness, or, you know, brownness, or non-whiteness, as we might call it, still has these implications that very much affect our daily lives, right? And the way we see things. And getting back and getting to your point, Zara, about like, how do we teach this and how do we talk about these basic concepts without doing a disservice to people of color, but also attending the very real needs of educating people from square one, right? Is that idea of, you know, how do we make them, I guess, see or acknowledge the fact that this is not only a historical process, but it might not be about you specifically, the person, right? And teaching people to see things systemically has always been one of the greater hurdles in teaching sociology. Gigi, I imagine that you're familiar with that, but it's that process, right, of being able to have folks acknowledge the fact that this is larger than just interpersonal relationships.
And I find it interesting that, because I geek out over these concepts, right? I really was tuned into discussing difficult things with people who weren't ready for it. And I didn't know they weren't ready because I'm a geek. And I'm also autistic. So I'm like, yeah, let's talk about how Italians weren't white and Irish weren't white. And people were like, what? And I'm like, you didn't know? Because here's why Columbus Day is a thing. They needed a way to like whiten up or Americanize Italians because they were being lynched. They were being characterized as base-born criminals, a bad element. They were being lynched right alongside Black people.
Yep.
And here we are with Columbus Day because they wanted to help legitimize or Americanize the Italians and change them from people of color to white. But people weren't ready to hear that. Like, people were like, what are you talking? Like, they get offended, they get offended. And I'm like, I didn't mean to offend you. These are just facts. Like, I just want to talk about history. We're in a historical society. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, but talk about history only so far as it makes me comfortable. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Like, don't push it past that line now. Like,
and I learned that. But what those things taught me was that, like you said, this was a process. It's political. It is to make sure that the people in power stay in power. So the more they can take away from people of color, they will. If they can get more people on their side, even people of our class, if they can turn them against us, it goes well for them. So of course they're going to do it.
Right.
And I think the greatest person I ever read books from, or the person I really like right now, is Brene Brown, right? And she says things like, most people are doing the best they can, right? They're doing the best they can. And that's where I had to go to. I had to leave the whole, conceptualization, intellectualization. I had to leave cerebrally these concepts and go to, people are doing the best they can. And some people aren't ready to have that conversation. And I had to learn to dial it back.
I get that. No, it's interesting, right? Because it's that idea of, we have all this knowledge, and how do we do it in a way that's not a floodgate?
Right.
Which I think underscores, like, it does not stop at the door for us. There is always complexity being introduced, even if we're just talking about history, there's still context. And the whole leave it at the door thing drives me up the wall. If you ever need to like set me off on a rant or something, that is one of the very few like, I come here to forget the outside world. Okay, thanks.
I'm glad you can do that.
Yay for your privilege.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what y'all. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what y'all's experience is like, but at least for me, one of the, politics, even if I want to leave politics at the door or at the gate or at troll or however people want to call it, it's always been thrust onto me in some capacity or another, right? Where I've had experiences with folks, whenever I tell them that I'm Puerto Rican and we talk about that, inevitably, it's almost like clockwork at this point. Somebody always brings up how corrupt the Puerto Rican government is, right? Or some sort of disaster, right? Or some sort of tragedy, or, hey, what do you think about Despacito? I don't like Despacito.
Oh my God.
But it's that idea, right? Because, and we can go into the nuances of that really quick, because one, it's seeing the Caribbean as either a tragedy or a playground, right? It's either one of the two, right? The Western mythos of the Caribbean is this sunny tropical paradise where there's rum and beautiful people and dancing and music that just so happens to kind of side skirt all the taboos of quote civilized society, right? And music videos like, for example, Despacito, continue that tradition of creating Puerto Rico as some happy space where it's all parties and dancing all the time. Don't get me wrong, some parties are pretty amazing. It's some it's people, we know how to celebrate. Yes, we do. But also, right, Puerto Rico has some legitimate struggles, right? But also, right, there's crises and problems and corruption, but there's also triumphs and there's also culture and there's a tradition of pride, right? The Puerto Rican identity developed rather early on during Spanish colonization because Spain was super far away, right? And there's this cultural identity that began to develop that says no, this is our space, this is our culture, especially as things became more and more mixed. And nowadays, Puerto Ricans are fiercely proud. Right, in the island, they're fiercely proud. And outside of the island, let me tell you, the Puerto Rican Day Parade in New York is a spectacle, to put it mildly. But there's this sense of larger unity, right? That it goes beyond a tragedy or a parody, where it's this declaration of, I'm here and I'm proud of being part of this tiny little island, right? And I have this rich tradition of music and language and expressions and mannerisms, right? Puerto Ricans talk with their hands all the time, and that disturbs some folks, right? And it's all of these little things that come together that go beyond this binary of creating the Caribbean as either a disaster or a paradise, right? It's almost like things have complexity to them.
So I want to steer us towards a conversation that we kind of touched on during the pre-show interview that I really, really wanted to dig into, which is kind of related to what we're talking about with the, even if we try not to bring in what people view as politics, which is actually just identity, it inevitably gets put on us. So, the box. We all know the box that we all get put in, right? Like we get to be neat little packages of whatever we are, and that's your box, and that's where you are. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more about kind of the lack of, I think it arises out of a lack of exposure, a lack of nuance, a lack of knowledge, whatever it is, but it's the thing that people take and they go, oh, you're Puerto Rican. Okay, great. I know exactly where you are. Like, here's the box I will put you in. And then you don't get to be anything else, right? Mm-hmm. So your persona, your opinions, everything about you that doesn't fit into that box is suddenly almost anathema. It's this, but I thought you were Puerto Rican.
Yeah. I got that at OSU when I told folks that I listened to heavy metal music. And they're like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't listen to like salsa or Daddy Yankee or Reggaeton or something? I listen to other things. But it's a small example, but it speaks to what you're saying.
Holy shit. I just had that same reaction. So I also listen to heavy metal, and people look at me like, you don't listen to rap or blues, or I'm just like, the fuck? What? Like, I love my shit. I don't know where you're at.
Same though.
Same.
Yeah, like,
I love country music. I love a lot of different types of music because I'm an audiophile, but if someone gets in my car, I probably have it on a country station. And I have had people be like, I didn't know Black people listen to country. And I was like, really? That's what you're gonna
well, we're gonna have a conversation about that, only because you said country, and that's a whole other like episode about country music.
We can have an episode. But one thing I wanted to bring up was, so as a person of color, as one person of color to another, like when I didn't meet with you before the show, right? So we get on the show and you say you're a sociologist. I'm like, yes, that's amazing. You say you're from Puerto Rico. I'm like, ¿de dónde eres in Puerto Rico? Like, which El Churri sandwich do you like the best? Like, I want to know what food truck sandwich that you love, because I love mixto. I worked on El Yunque for a little while in Puerto Rico. So like, I want to know things about you that don't put you in a box though, because even though you told me you're from Puerto Rico, I want to know things about your experience in Puerto Rico. Like, what's the name of your town in Puerto Rico that you are from? I would like to know that. Maybe I've never met anyone else from that town, but then I'll be able to file that as, hey, now I know someone from this town. And if I meet no one else, I'll be like, hey, I know someone from this town too. But I don't paint a picture of you in a box. I think
but you also have exposure, Gigi. Like, you have exposure to different cultures. You have education at your fingertips, right? Fingertips, using that term relatively. Yeah. People, I mean, those boxes are put there because they're socially constructed. It's part of race, right? We have to check that box, so we put that in there.
I wish that white people would think of us as whole human beings with tons of facets and things that may be expected, and then maybe things that are unexpected, and that they're curious and they want to learn about us as human beings, each individually, and not just in a box. That's my wish.
No, absolutely. And I think so. We're sitting here, and I'm looking at the three of us women on the top, and we all, I mean, for all intents and purposes, we look like Black people. We probably check the box of Black women. I don't know. I haven't talked to y'all about that. But the reality is, my family is from Haiti.
I'm Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican.
And I'm Spanish.
And so we have these very different nuances that most people don't take the time to know, because it's uncomfortable, because it's easier to say, we're going to put you in this box, and then I'm going to interact with you based on what I know about the box, because that is what helps me understand how to interact with you. That's how I know how to have those interpersonal dialogues and react to you. I think about most people will never know that I'm Haiti. Maybe now, if they're watching the show, maybe never know that my father's from Haiti, that he's an immigrant, how like desperately passionate I am about immigration, because they see a Black woman. And because it's something I've done my entire life, I check off Black. You're not going to know that my mother is white, German, Swedish, Irish. I mean, the combination, this is like a drinking vessel right here, right? But most people aren't going to know that. Sorry. It's true though. I mean, Haitian, German, Irish, I was born blessed. But most people aren't going to know that, because they've already written us off as this is XYZ. So right. How do we do that in the SCA?
Ooh, that's always a hard question, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it's I think personally, from a sort of sociological lens, there's a lot of theories that explain why we do that, right? In the sense of it helps sort of social interactions happen a little easier when you have preconceived notions, right? It makes sense. Unfortunately, a lot of those preconceived notions can be harmful. So it's this, what's worked for me is always this constant sort of thinking process of like, all right, this is my assumption. Hold on, let me deconstruct these assumptions and see where they're coming from. And just, we don't have to have a full philosophical exercise. right? We don't need to go in the Socratic method right now. All we need to do is, I think this person, it looks a certain kind of way. Where are you from? And take it as honest, because there's always that tendency of where you really from. Like if they say they're from Chicago, oh, awesome. Never been to Chicago. Chicago sounds nice, right? There's this sense, there's this desire to find some sort of essence of the person. And I think one of the hardest things that speaks to seeing Black folks as people and seeing non-white folks as people is accepting people for who they are presenting at the moment, right? Assume that people are being natural, being genuine, and being honest, right? And it's always, I think, a difficult mental exercise to do, because for a lot of folks that also challenges that box, and to challenge that box gives folks a little bit of existential anxiety, right? And I've taken philosophy classes and I went through grad school. I know what existential anxiety feels like, but it's good for you. Like, the folks listening, it's good for you, right? Embrace that non-knowledge, embrace that moment of like, I'm probably very wrong about this. Let's find out.
It's called sitting with discomfort.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and it's acknowledging how you're othering people, right? Like, I encourage people to contextualize the things they're asking by asking themselves if they would have asked a white person the same thing, right? Like when I get the, where are you from? No, like, where are you really from? Like, where's your family from? I'm like, so would you be digging this hard for like Kathleen O'Hara? Or is it like, just curious,
are you really
right?
Irish? Yeah.
Right. Like, why are you digging so hard with me and not someone else? And are you upholding hegemonic structures that other people by doing it, right? We've touched on tokenism, but there is a line with tokenism and fetishization where taking someone and making them feel separate, whether for good or bad reasons, is still othering. It's still potentially very problematic. And while people of color have continuously asked to be given platforms, the platforms are for our voices, not for you to speak on behalf of us or
Right.
you to speak for us. Like, it's different, right? And I think some people don't understand that idea of like the benevolent othering still being bad.
Absolutely. And I think the better we tackle this in the SCA, the better recruitment and retention we're going to have, right? That type of othering that happens, people forget that discrimination and racism doesn't require ill intent. A lot of people think that it does, right? That's the popular notion of racism, that it requires somebody to be actively racist, a member of the KKK or whatever. But in benevolent othering can still serve and uphold institutional racism, because it still ideologically upholds this inherent separation of people on racial categories and thinking that that is a legitimate system of social organization, right? So yeah, absolutely.
And I think we talked about in our pre-interview how complicated representation is, right? A lot of people, I've met some
I am ready for this one.
I've met some folks who have been, I'm going to say most of my life, I've met folks who've been very sheltered, and they're like, you're the first Black person I've ever known and pretty much ever seen, right? And when I look at the SCA, and I still hear folks saying the same thing, I'm like, well, connect with folks, get to know folks, and let me send you some good representation to go to. I'm like, there's this person, Gigi and Jessica. It's so difficult to really want to have that representation, do it in a non-tokenizing manner, not to fetish anyone. And I mean, quite literally finding the representation within the SCA, right? Oftentimes there may not be anyone to even be the token. I think the person that we talked to for the last episode was talking about, the first, it's an episode coming up, one of the first Black people to receive an award, a peerage in the area, right? And so when we don't have even representation in some areas, how do we do this? How do we do the outreach? It's intentional. It has to be intentional. But again, opening the floor to representation is complicated.
Yes, very much so, right? Because it's all of what you've just talked about, and I couldn't place it in better words myself. But it is complicated, right? And I think I one of the things that I've been sort of trying to lean into over the past few years is presenting myself as authentically Latino as I can. Like that's why I try to incorporate Spanish in my SCA things, right? My surcoat for my King's Champion surcoat has one sleeve that has Draco Invictus, which is the mid-realm motto in Latin, and then on the other side it has it in Spanish, right? My Squire's oath that I gave to my knight, Sir Marcus, was in Spanish. My King's Champion oath was also in Spanish, right? These sort of small moments of showing up authentically is, I think, hopefully can be used as smaller moments of like representation and be like, hey, it's complicated, right? But these are small things that at the very least expose people to showing what representation can be like. It doesn't have to be a token, right? Or it doesn't have to be this grandiose display. It can also sometimes just be just doing things in a little bit of a different way, right? And my frustration is that, and this is something that Zara and I have talked about, the idea of folks of color always holding each other to stricter standards representation wise than other folks, right? It's when somebody messes up, it's like, dude, you had it, what happened? Instead of allowing them the grace that we would have allowed somebody else for the same mistake.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a very difficult process. I don't know. It's always, and to say nothing of people who deserve censure, right? When they mess up, it's just an extra blow that I think people who want that representation feel. Not to minimize, the victims of people who have committed atrocities, but from a person of color perspective, or from a Latino perspective, seeing somebody who's Latino mess up and like do terrible things, it's extra devastating, right? Because all of a sudden it goes from, man, you're out here, we don't know each other, but you're out here and that's cool, to now I hate you, dude. Now I think you've done terrible things and there's no going back. And that just is a gut punch, because that's one less person that I can look up to.
Right. It feels like a true loss. I mean, it really is. I had, not the same situation as you did by any means, but, there was someone who seemed to be a friendly person and it turned out not to be. And that is a blow. That is a blow. Like, we are supposed to, in my mind, I'm like, as people of color, we need to boost people of color up. We need to be supportive, because there's no one behind us who's going to do that if we don't do it for each other. And so when someone does have that mess up, it's hard not to feel like you let all of us down. I don't want to be associated with that. And now they're going to see all 50 of us like that. I don't know how many Black people there are, but now we're all going to have that label, and we're all going to have to wear that label, and we're all going to have to, give all of these excuses and say, it's not me, it's not me. Whereas, I mean, there's a lot of white people, so they can kind of distance each other from that. Like, be like, no, it was that white person over there. And at the same time, we get confused for each other. I can't tell you how many times I've been called Jessica or Gigi, and I'm like, no, what?
You don't look nothing alike, but it happened.
Oh, I got my dog going.
I'm sorry
about that. No, I'm just like, what?
I think that you're touching on something that I'm just going to be very, very honest about.
That's the place.
Marginalized groups are always held to a standard of like, oh, that person did it, all y'all do it. It has been a recurrent thing, right? Like, we don't get to be whole people. We get to be whatever the representative of us did that was negative. And then we get tarred with the same brush. So I do really understand where a lot of people of color are coming from when there is that kind of almost instinctive, like, no, like, how could you do this to us? And I understand, like, I totally agree. Like, we should be giving each other and ourselves the grace to be human and be whole. But again, just speaking very honestly, I know damn well what happens when I play into any kind of stereotype related to Black women. I become the angry Black woman, right? Because they've seen that somewhere else and they take that stereotype and they go, great, now it fits. I've been waiting. Yeah. And there it is. And now that's me, and that's Gigi, and that's Nina, and that's all of us. And so it is kind of hard not to have that instinctive reaction when you know it's coming, because you've seen it happen before. We've all heard well, Hispanic people do X, and Black people do X, and Asian people do X. And it's ridiculous. It's so broad that it's ludicrous, it's inaccurate, but we know it's coming. So you can't help but be frustrated when you're like, damn, you gave them more ammo.
Yeah, exactly. And it's you gave them more ammo, and damn it, and we need each other. Like, we're in a society where we're starved for representation, for people that sound like us or have that upbringing like us. To have one person fall by the wayside is just less comfort, right? Because even if we're in separate kingdoms, we know, like, oh, there's somebody out there. All right, if there's somebody out there, that makes us feel a little bit more welcome. If they're closer, that's great. But if they're out there, that's good too. It's I remember I was listening to an interview about sort of Blackness in the SCA with a fighter up from the Cleflands, which is northeast Ohio, and he was saying that, like, hey, there are sometimes when I walk into a room and I look for at an event, an SCA event, and I look for Black folks and I make that eye contact and I go, like, all right, you here, we're here for each other, right? Okay, cool, we're good. And having that safety in numbers is something that oftentimes white folks don't have to think about, right? But that idea of, if I let Spanish slip in an area that might be less tolerant of Latinos, what might that look like? Thankfully, again, the SCA has done a really good job of being welcoming and, like, leaning in. But this is still happening within larger social contexts that folks of color just have to live with, right? Coming into there's a very particular reason why certain folks don't go to events in certain parts of the United States, right? Like, it's just, we don't get to, like you've all said at the beginning of the thing, like, we don't get to leave politics at the gate. Oftentimes those politics happen within the gate. So yeah, it's definitely a lot going on, to put it mildly.
I think some of the hardship and some of the reason why we have this show and why I wanted to put this show on, right, is to show the faces behind these stories and not make it just another number, right? Because there are so few of us, and our stories don't have a platform, a real platform, a good platform. I've seen people of color, I've seen LGBTQ on these panels, but really having a spot to say, like, I am here. What you were saying, like, Jessica, you said, what you are talking about is my identity, not politics. And this is the one place where I'm hoping that folks can see and like put a face to these stories. Put a face to these stories that you see in the news. Put a face to these incidents that you hear about in the SCA, because it's real. Like, it is our lives. This is real life for us. This is heavy shit. At the end of the day, there's more heavy shit when I go home. Given some of the work that some of us do, man, there's heavy shit at work. It's a 24/7 life of heavy shit. And, in a way, I want to share that so people understand what the invisible labor looks like and can pick some of that up. But it's hard, and it's hard to band us all together almost. I don't know exactly what it is. I know on the Scadians of Color page, there was one time someone asked a question like, where are all the people of color? And oh my God, I've never seen so many names in Ontier. I was like, what? Well, where are all of you? Like, how are there so many people in Ontier and I've never seen you? How do we band together and bring each other up when we don't even know who we are?
Right.
like we don't even know where the representation is. And I think, you know, one of the topics that has come up in a couple of the shows is how do we reach out even within the SCA? How do we bring people together other than have this like giant carnival with people of color, which would be like freaking phenomenal. Like talk about an incredible part. But how do we make those connections so people have those social groups outside of just the internet?
Right. It's hard, right? Because it's, you know, I don't want to, like we've talked about, I don't want to force people to be like, hey, you're a person of color, let's automatically be friends.
Yeah, because that doesn't work.
Right. It's no, but it's also at the same time, I want these folks to be out here, right? Because one, it's selfishly good for me to see that, but also legitimately, you know, we're having these discussions, you know, y'all created this and nurture this Voices of Color project because ultimately we care deeply about these things. It's not like we're trying to trash talk the SCA or trash talk white folks. I haven't met everyone in the SCA, so I can't pass judgment on that. I haven't met every white person. I can't pass judgment on them either. But what's important here is that we're not trying to trash talk. We are so passionate about this because we care, right? And y'all care deeply about these issues, and you want to see a positive change to the SCA, and that's a commendable thing, right? It's always the question of logistics of how do we do it. But I think, but even having these small moments, even having these highlights, right, can just be things, resources that we can send to folks like, hey, on tier, you know, y'all can show up. Here's all the video proof that you need, that we're waiting for you. We're right here, you know, ready to meet you, ready, we're out here. But it's always a slow process, that's for sure.
I don't know that Antier's ready for a gathering of the people of color. I'm not sure. So we have in the chat a Voices of Color Festival meetup would be so much fun.
Let's do it.
Maybe this is the time. Maybe 2022 we'll have to do a Voices of Color. Voices of Color goes live on the road, and we'll just travel. We'll just travel the states and just be like, hey, what's up?
We're in Eldemir here now live.
So wait, I want to make sure that we touch on, it's kind of a big question, but it's peripheral, and I know we're gonna jump soon because I have my list. So as far as kind of expectations for people of color, in the SCA, right, persona is huge, right? What you choose to explore, what you choose to kind of project, and what you choose to model, I think is incredibly important, and how you choose it and what makes you come to it. Like a lot of people will explore kind of their own history, which introduces a set of issues for people of color whose history has often been intentionally erased, or is rife with potentially problematic topics, right? We have to contend with the idea that delving into the history for a lot of people of color means exploring complex issues of colonization, of assimilation, of rape, it's really, really complex. And it generally also exists in a space where a lot of folks who are of European descent get to go, I don't really need to engage with that too much. Like I can just kind of over here, and I
can be Celt and not worry about it.
Right. Yeah. And then on top of that, I feel like there's some level of expectation. I've gotten both sides from people. I've gotten the traditional awful, you know, hey, you could be a slave. That could be a thing that you wanted to do. I've gotten the, you know, are you going to do like an African persona because, you know, you're Black? And that was basically where it stopped. And I've also gotten the like, well, I mean, you know, obviously, like if you're going to do European, like you're already kind of anachronistic, right? Because, you know, and then I make them say it so that they feel uncomfortable and I feel better. But there's a lot of complexity there. So I want to kind of unpack that, and I want to hear you talk about that. with regard to your persona and like your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So for context, for folks who don't know, I'm doing an late 13th, mostly early 14th century Spanish, and Spanish wide umbrella. What does Spanish mean anyway? Specifically focusing around the area between Castile and Aragon. And that's kind of what I'm sort of building towards, right? Your personas are never finished. But what's interesting about that is, I'm drawing on the sort of Spanish European part of my cultural heritage, being Puerto Rican. But one of the things that we've had the conversations about one of the things that I grapple with is the knowledge and the fact that, not only do I very much likely have ancestors that lived in those times, but I also have ancestors that lived in those times that wanted to kill Moors, or wanted to kill Islamic folks. They take over the Umayyad Caliphate, who, I don't know this for certain, but the anti-Semitism was casual in the Catholic kingdoms of Spain, right? There are multiple instances in the 14th century alone, to not say anything about the Inquisition, about Jews being expelled from different cities and towns, right? And eventually, of course, for the 1490s happened, right, where the kingdom of Castile and Leon eventually took over the kingdom of Granada, got all of that gold and money, and then used that money to fund expeditions to the Americas, which we all know how that turned out, to put it mildly and delicately. And putting it indelicately, that's how Spain and Portugal conquered and destroyed the indigenous populations of the Caribbean. So there's that. And that is something that I have to deal with, right? And that's something and it's something that I want to deal with too, because there's a very specific moment there's this heritage that I was born in a colony, in an American colony, but that was a Spanish colony. These are the ancestors that likely, raped and pillaged people, right? There's, these bloodlines are very much steeped in violence and conquest. That's the truth fact of life if you're living in the Caribbean. And if you want to do these personas and do them justice, especially Western European personas, there's almost a need to engage with the fact that these are the people that would eventually conquer, rape, destroy, colonize the Western half of the globe. Right. There is no if, ands, or buts about it. Right. We have the United States, Canada, Mexico, Central America, and South America. We have them because of these empires. Right. And these empires grew wealthy by taking all of the gold and the silver and the people and the materials and the resources, taking them from the Caribbean and the Americas back to Europe. And that's how, we had the golden ages of the different French empires of. That's why the British Empire was so powerful, right? Because they conquered 3/4 of the planet. All of these things kind of come together and are historical facts that we have to deal with, especially with personas such as mine, right? Likely I had Spanish ancestry, or likely I have Spanish ancestry that dealt with this kind of stuff casually because it was a fact of life, right? And what does that mean when you try to bring that forward as a persona, and as you try to study it, right? Do you lean into the sort of Catholic disregard for anyone non-Catholic with every implication that has, or how do you acknowledge it in a respectful manner and be like, yeah, this is something that people did, and my persona likely did and was happy to do it too. So, it's one of the struggles, and I think that I personally am not asking every white person who has a Western European persona to grapple with that legacy, but it is something important that we have to acknowledge, right? And it's just a real fact of life. And yeah, I lost that last point that I was going to make, unfortunately, but I guess what's important here is growing up in the marginalized communities like Puerto Rico, colonization is a constant reminder, right? And folks living in the US who are not indigenous or who are not a part of any diaspora don't have to deal with that as a daily fact of life, right? In Puerto Rico, colonization was a reminder in some capacity or another, right? Whether it be thinking that everything from the United States was inherently better, or not having any real political power to self-determine in the island because we always have to ask the US Congress for permission to do anything, right? Or being subjected to trade laws that are exorbitantly expensive, amongst the most expensive in the world, and us not having the financial capital to deal with that in a healthy way without going bankrupt. Or, right, to say nothing of private companies that come in and try to get tax breaks and find cheap labor, right? Walmart is a big employer in Puerto Rico, and all of that wealth doesn't stay in Puerto Rico. The wealth that does stay in Puerto Rico is the salaries that folks get, who are often not working full time, because that's Walmart's business model, right? And all of this wealth is extracted. And this is a constant thing that folks of where I'm from have to deal with. But a lot of Americans don't have to deal with it because we're here, we're in the United States, land of the free and melting pot and so whatever. But it's an important fact of life that often I think people just don't think about and really don't realize the extent and the gravity of how far and how deeply these things go through and how manifest they are throughout history, even today.
That's a lot to unpack.
Yes. Yes, it's a lot. But you know, that's growing up in the Caribbean. That's growing up in Puerto Rico, right? The tragedies of, to borrow an example from Haiti, right? The tragedy of the earthquake of Port-au-Prince, tragedy as it is, was largely made worse by the fact that so many farmers were living in Port-au-Prince when the earthquake hit, because so many NGOs and international food aid flooded the market in Haiti, leading farmers out of work and trying to go to the city to try to find jobs. And all of a sudden an earthquake hits a vulnerable population, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, this is life in the Caribbean. That's a fact of things that we have to deal with. And when we think about personas and we think about the legacy, the political legacy of our personas, of the times and cultures we want to portray, extravagant as they were, right? Don't get me wrong. I am very proud of the fact that I'm doing a Spanish persona, because very few people are, at least in the mid-realm. But that is still that is just one wrinkle in the legacy, to put it mildly. There's no escaping it. I grew up in a place where you couldn't escape it because it was just fact of life. So there is a lot to unpack, right? But that is part and parcel of the consequences of how we think about history, right? And how history manifests today.
Well, and it needs to be part of how we teach. It needs to be part of how we recruit. I mean, I am not necessarily saying that everyone needs to engage with kind of this depth of subject matter, but there needs to be some level of awareness that, particularly as we try to make our organization more welcoming to marginalized groups, you have to understand the context that these people cannot escape, right? You cannot bring someone in and then be like, go fly free and explore, and there's no baggage ever for you ever. When that's just not, it's not a reality. Right. Well, and I think it comes out of, so to some degree, it comes out of just genuine ignorance. And I mean that in the sense of just a lack of knowledge. We don't teach this type of history as much. We just don't. So there is a lack of knowledge here to contend with. But on top of that, I do think it kind of comes from that tokenism place we were talking about. Get in here and be happy and brown. And that's just not a realistic ask, right? You have to acknowledge what you are asking of people, what you are expecting of people. And to some degree, I think we also have to acknowledge that we have boxed people in to the point where we expect them not to care about this. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, why do we need to recruit in communities that don't actually care about history? And I'm like, what racist sentiments
they do. Trust me, they do.
When you think that people of color don't care about their history, like what got you? Because that is some next level problematic thinking. Especially, again, and I have to underscore this, coming from usually dominant groups that have intentionally tried to erase the histories that we're talking about, that don't teach the histories that we're talking about. Like it it is an incredible amount of audacity to say, well, they didn't care anyway, when it's like, I could not find out if I tried.
Right. I really want to make a point here before we continue. One of the things that I hear from folks when anything like this gets discussed, or just even an innocent, like, what is the SCA, right? What's it about? The common phrase of history as it should have been, right? Or the Middle Ages as it should have been. I would love that. That would be fantastic, right? But that is just not the legacy that we have to contend with, right? And I understand that people use that as a sort of rhetorical device to say, like, hey, we're much more about like virtues and service and creating cool things and coming together in a medieval setting. And that's wonderful. That really is, that's one of the big draws of the SCA to me, right? This idea of us being people who can aspire to a certain nobility and display it in a really cool way. That's awesome. I really genuinely think that's awesome. But that doesn't erase the Middle Ages as they were, right? And the Middle Ages as they were laid the foundation for some very serious, intense cultural baggage that we're still dealing with, right? And it's to not say of, you know, the development of the modern state, but also the rise of colonialism and capitalism and the idea of empires stretching the planet as opposed to a region, massive wealth disparity, just all of these things, right? The very concept of race, right, as we know it today, was developed as an offshoot or as a consequence of Western European expansion to the Americas, right? So that's immediately a thing that is happening in our SCA period that has long-lasting effects. And we still, like, I mean, we're still dealing with this thing, right? So that's an important thing to consider and remember. So the history as it should have been, fine, sure, but history as it was has some very real systemic, long-lasting effects that affect people who are trying to get into the SCA in the first place, right? So I wanted to address that really quickly because I know that somebody is going to have that rhetorical device as like a backup, and sure, fine, but also that whole thing that I just mentioned.
Well, and I think it's easy to not see those systems. So I think about the systems of the SCA and the work that Jessica and Gigi are doing. Most people are not going to have that big picture. Most people are never going to see the systems within the SCA that continue to perpetuate certain behaviors and certain thoughts and certain ideals, because it is just so massive. I mean, and it's not often talked about. If we parallel that with history, it's not taught. Are you kidding me? You try to bring up structural racism or systemic bias or systemic racism, and it's like I'm speaking another language. People are like, no, that's not. And I'm like, so let's trace it back. Let's trace it back through history and see where this all started. And it's like people can't conceptualize that. There's this certain level of, again, discomfort, right? Where it's like, oh, this is feeling icky. So let's again focus on this here and now and moving forward, and things are so much better, and look how we've grown, and and I'm like, you need to stop. This Pollyanna shit is not going to fly with me because I know the truth. I've seen the systems. Someone recently said, I went to the end of the rainbow and that ain't no pot of gold, right? It's my favorite thing. I have to put it on my my signature block at work, but it's that. And it's hard for folks to make that leap and that connection between what history is then and how that history continues to play out. And I don't know, have y'all, Jessica and Gigi, have y'all been successful, found some successful ways to make that connection for folks?
By all means.
Or Roberto, if there's, anyone, systems, go.
I mean, for me, it's one of the bigger challenges because it's something that I constantly deal with students, right? How do we make them deal with the fact that this is more than just a one-to-one. This is more than just who you talk to on the street or whatever, right? It's these larger systems that guide and coerce behavior. I'm explicitly very privileged in the sense that not only did I meet a lot of folks who, when I was in grad school in Columbus, which means that there was a sort of shared baseline of knowledge and concepts that, like, at the very least allowed us to grapple with these things. I'm still in that space right now because I'm in Louisville, which it's a big university town, right? And it's fairly liberal leaning compared to many parts of Kentucky. So I've been privileged in the fact that oftentimes I actually don't have to deal with that. Where I've had to deal with that, the way that I've talked about it mostly is talking about it through the lens of constrained choices, right? Of this idea that, like, you know, a lot of folks like to say, like, well, we all have different choices to make in life. I'm like, sure, yes, fine. At a certain point, we all have to make a choice about X or Y or Z thing. But the availability of X, Y, or Z thing is contingent upon these larger social structures, right? And that's where I bring in the real life examples, right? Or even if X, Y, or Z choices are available, the ability to consider them as possible and viable and legitimate choices is still another facet, still another variable to even think about, right? So starting from there, from the ability of individualist agency and expanding, kind of, instead of going from top down, going from bottom up, as it were, allows folks to kind of get the message a little bit. I don't know if people, you know, internalize the message too much, or at the very least, like, agree with it, but I'm happy with the fact that they're being exposed to it at the very least, right? Because at the very least, they're presented a different view of our society, as opposed to, you know, this idea that we're all just random individuals living in groups that have free will, and that's kind of the extent of it. It's more complicated than that, like sociologically speaking. But that's a good place to start, right? You have choices, but the availability of those choices is greater or lesser, or is coerced in a particular direction based on larger social systems, right? And what I do in my class is also I have the receipts, I have the charts, I have the data that, like, listen, this is from government statistics, or this is from census, or this is from this organization. We can disagree about the methods, fine, but these conclusions, you can replicate those results, and I bet money that they'll come out pretty similar. And if you disagree, then you are denying a scientific endeavor based not on scientific merit, but based on whether or not you want to even accept the data. And that's on you. I can't make folks care. I can't. That's not a thing that I can do. But at the very least, I can expose them to data. I can expose them to my arguments. I can present it in a way that guides them towards the conclusion, rather than, you know, forces them off the ledge, as it were.
So I think that what you're describing it's hopefully what I can aim towards. I'm trying to think about how I present concepts to kind of get people to understand systems. And I think that the SCA is absolutely a mirror of our society, right? Like, it parallels almost one for one in some cases. It really does mimic social structures.
Yeah.
Which, again, leave it at the door, it doesn't work. But because of that, because it mirrors social structures, I've used examples from within the SCA to try to translate concepts that are kind of in modern DEI society, so that people can understand them from a perspective that they can directly relate to.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It works on a basic level. So a good example, when I talk about privilege, I don't introduce the concept of privilege the same way I do in the modern world, right? In the modern world, I like to just jump right in and I talk about how my name is very white sounding and very white passing until you see me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the SCA, I start by talking about where you live, right? Do you live on the edge of a kingdom? Do you live in the middle of a kingdom? Do you live in a very active barony? Do you live in a very remote shire? How does that affect what events you go to? How does that affect the time? So, like, what, for example, right? What events can you make it to when you might not be able to take time off of work, right? So now you're down to day trips. If you live 6 hours away from the place where most of the events are happening, you're not hitting up a lot of those events. If you're a person that needs to go to a lot of events, to participate in tournaments, to be seen, to be showing in arts or fighting or rapier or whatever it is, that can really hold you back, right? Are there a lot of practices where you are? That can affect things. So people understand kind of this idea based on this very arbitrary place of where you live, because I lived in Chicago. That is not the most active area of the Middle Kingdom for SCA. It is the largest metropolitan area in the Middle Kingdom, but it's not a one-for-one. And there's nothing, I mean, that's just, it is what it is, right?
Right.
That's the idea behind privilege. And so getting people to kind of connect to this in a way that they understand before then having to introduce the empathetic, now I need you to think about it from a perspective you don't inhabit. I think that helps put it together for people, but at the same time, you hit a wall at some point with that, right? There's only so many parallels I can draw before I'm just kind of diminishing issues, or I'm not able to find an exact corollary, or people like the application kind of gets weaker as you get into the more nuanced issues. But I think for basics, that's not a bad starting point as far as exploring systems.
Right. And I mean, I correct me if I'm wrong, but in the more basic introductory DEI classes, right? If you have somebody who's there, then that means that they're at the very least willing to sort of try to engage with what they're saying. So there's some buy-in there, but I can definitely see how more complex issues, it's harder to really find an SCA parallel.
Yeah, because at some point you have to acknowledge that the SCA has its own culture, right?
Yeah.
And within the culture of the SCA, and then all of the different kingdom cultures on top of it, we have created our own social norms. And so using it as a parallel only goes so far before now you're interacting with a whole nother set of social politics.
Right. I mean,
and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, no, we, the clear hierarchy that we have in the SCA isn't as clear in the rest of life. It's not. So I definitely understand how things just kind of fall by the wayside a little bit there, but we should, next time we have a time to chat, kind of with more time, we can troubleshoot that to see, because I'm sure we can find something. I'm positive that there's something out there that we can find.
I mean, I think so. There has to be a way to effectively kind of move education into a space where it's serving everyone. I don't want to be the person that so narrows it into a niche that it's like, oh, well, this is helpful for you, but everyone else already, we've been new, so this is not good. And I also don't want to leave it so basic that people think that there's not more, right? It's important to me that people understand that, like, we are only barely skimming the surface here. This is the basic thing that you need to even enter the conversation. If this is something you want to really unpack, you got a lot further to go. I have a lot further to go,
That's for sure.
And also,
I feel that, yeah.
Also, that with these concepts, you're not blaming anyone. Like, these are concepts that we're talking about because we want you to understand the systems at play, but we are not trying to place fault with you, because a lot of times it turns into a binary of, well, if that was bad, then who's the person who did it? Because they're also bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Who's the person who made, who made sure I had privilege? Like, what group did that?
Yeah.
And so those people are bad, right? And it's, no, that's not the point. That's not where we're going. And it's hard for human beings not to want to do the boxes, right? Good or bad. What box does this go in? Does this mean I'm good or bad, or those people were good or bad, or this group is good or bad? And when we're having these discussions, it's a lot deeper than just the simplistic good or bad.
Yeah.
Right.
And once you invoke that defensiveness, it's very hard to keep the conversation on track.
Right. And I mean, there's always something to be said about folks who place their emotions over the actual discussion. But it's also the idea of that's where we get folks wanting to sort of, well, do I need to apologize for whatever? Like, no, you don't. Nobody's trying to make you apologize for anything. That's not what this is about really at all. It's not about apologizing. It's about merely recognizing the fact that these are things that you have inherited, whether or not you wanted to, right? We never have a choice of inheriting all of our privileges and marginalizations, right? All of our good things and bad things, but at the very least acknowledging them, right? It's kind of like diagnosing something. You can't treat a condition without diagnosing it first. So it's that process, and hopefully folks, internalize that a little further. Folks who have maybe not grappled with this and are listening to this today, just go like, oh, it's not about being blamed. No, it's not that. It's about, we're all in this together, to quote High School Musical. So, we have to band together and sort of acknowledge each other's role in all of this stuff. Yes, I did bring in High School Musical. You're welcome.
How do you follow that? Yeah. I think I had to step away for a bit. The good bad binary is always going to be the crux in making change happen. I start my classes with, guess what? Everybody has bias. And what? Right?
Yeah,
and we move forward.
Yep.
We acknowledge it, we move forward. And that's the same when we are talking about privilege. That's the same when we're talking about many things. And if we get in the good, bad, binary, we get stuck. We get defensive. Change doesn't happen. We feel the brunt of, systems of oppression and feel like we're out and we're supposed to take care of everything. And because it's our fault and our ancestors' fault, I'm like, no, let's start with today. My biggest challenge has been getting people in the class. Yes, it's good to make the assumption that if they're there, they want to learn. What I often find out is that, one, the people in the class aren't really the people who need to be in the class. Or two, the people in class think they're more woke than they are. And then they get in the class and they hear something and they're like, ouch, excuse me. What did you just say?
It's like a weird Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yes.
You think you're more woke than you are. But yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
It's this weird thing to kind of navigate. And I see it a lot in the SCA, especially now that, we're viral and everything's online, that people just need a little more education. I chuckle because sometimes it's really awful and you watch it and it's like watching a car crash, but oftentimes it's just like, I know you're trying to do the thing and you didn't quite nail it, so how do we help you get there? I think the thing as an SCA, I'm going to say it again, that we need to build a culture of saying thank you when we receive a piece of education, especially from groups that have that invisible labor put upon their shoulders, and then have the ability on the same side of the coin, the ability to say, hey, this thing happened and here's why it might not be the best, right? To call out some of the, I don't like to use call alongside the folks and not feel like we'll be punished for it. Because then it's that perpetual cycle, right? Then it's the angry Black woman or the angry Puerto Rican guy, and
excuse me, I'm spicy. Thank you very much.
See, okay, I want you to talk to my partner. I think my partner is listening, and I'm like, in Haitian, we're passionate. We don't argue. We are just passionate.
Care.
Yeah, I strongly believe in my stuff. This is not an argument. I'm just telling you that I'm right, and it's because I'm passionate. No, anyways, she's gonna hate me.
sorry to interrupt, but no, you're absolutely on it, right? Creating a culture of folks being held accountable, but also being humble about it. It's, I think from a fighting perspective, personally, from a rattan fighting perspective, we tell each other when a blow was not struck well. We're like, hey, that was light, or that was kind of felt weird. I'm not sure about that. and fighters go, oh, okay, I'm sorry, let me try to hit you better. Removing the hitting the other person bit, that same principle can apply, right? Like, oh, that was kind of not right. Okay, let me just try to figure this out a little more. And the best fighters will be good communicators because they're the ones that are able to say, you didn't hit me well, and this is why, right? And expanding that, I think, culturally is, I think, what you were speaking to, right? That idea of creating this culture that it's more commonplace.
And I think there are pockets of change. I'm not sure what it will take for a systems-wide change. I think, well, I'm just going to say it sitting from where I am because I can, that if we are to have some systems change, then people who are doing the work, such as Jessica and Gigi, need to have these places at the table, and they need to be prominent positions where it's, I mean, the SCA has to take EDI work seriously and show that there's a system in place through giving resources, providing education, mandatory education. Why can't anyone who steps into a Crown position take a 101 class on EDI? I mean, like, to me, that's just an asinine.
Well, part of that is setting your leaders up for success. If you want the leaders in your organization and your nonprofit organization to be successful, you need to arm them with the information so that they can be successful.
Yes.
So that would mean, you know, seneschals, crowns,
officers of state in general.
Baron and baronesses, baronial seneschals. Like, I wholeheartedly agree with you. You want to set them up for success, and you can't fault them for information they never got. Like, arm them with the knowledge so they can be successful.
And you know, you hope, I hope that someday we'll see it. I know that mandatory training is not necessarily the best way. People don't learn because you make it so. And right, we have to start somewhere, whether it's with, you know, I'm just gonna say it because I can again, the people who hit things with sticks, or it's the seneschals who really are the silent leaders in a lot of ways, finding ways to build that movement almost. I look to the knights a lot, and I'm going to look to the peers, right? I'm going to say, all y'all peers, I look to the knights because there's leaders, people, you know, crown, sitting royalty, whatever the case may be. I'm going to call on you, all y'all listening. I'm going to call on you to help lift up the work that is being done by people in the areas of burden in some cases. I know I said a lot of words that may not have made sense. So
I think they made sense. And how noble of a thing is it to be in this place where you can affect institutional change and having the capacity and influence to do so, right? Sure, every kingdom is not the same, right?
No.
There's SCA culture and then kingdom cultures and so on and so forth. But how wonderful is it to have that ability to affect that change or to push for change, right? Because we know from a sociological perspective that social change happens fastest when social systems are changed to do so, but the people in control of those social systems regard that change as legitimate, right?
Okay.
When the system is set up to be receptive of that change, it's easier. It's significantly easier, right? So yeah, it's a great position to be in, I would say, to have that ability to go, oh yeah, I can do this. So we'll see what happens. I know that social change is slow, unfortunately, but I do see inklings and little hints and little pockets, to borrow a term from you, of things evolving and changing and just kind of keeping up with the times a little bit, which is good.
So I think we are getting to that place where we start wrapping up. And I want to be able to talk about the dead man's test. So
I love this term. I love it. Oh, it's so good.
So let's talk about the
allyship part of our discussion.
Go for it.
Well, and so I don't want to leave the discussion. We've had this discussion many times on this show because we always end with the, so what can allies do? And we've had many discussions about what an ally is. So I want to hear it from you, Roberto, what an ally is, what that term means, if you even use that term. You may have something else. And then what can that look like within the SCA?
Whew. I've actually, since our pre-interview talk and to today, I've been thinking a lot about what that looks like, right? Because I don't want to give the traditional read a book kind of answer, you know, and that's helpful, right? There's a litany of wonderful books that can talk about these issues in a much more detailed capacity than we have, which is great. But more so than that is, you know, a good ally, right, or a good compatriot or a good citizen of the kingdom, is to me somebody that is humble, inquisitive, and able to realize, like, hey, maybe I don't know about this as much as I think I do. So let me just stop for a second and ask, right? And then internalize that knowledge and is willing to do a little homework on themselves, right, for themselves. A good ally to me is not somebody who is very obsequious and very performative with their graciousness, right? Oh, let me not speak in your own space, kind of, you know, that makes a show of showing how much of an ally they are. Like, you know, it's that kind of like hashtag allyship that really doesn't go farther than making them feel nice. A good ally, I think, finally, to finish it, is somebody that realizes that these systemic issues all affect each other, right? So, for example, being anti-racist is not just about including more folks of color into the SCA or creating a more racially equitable society, but it's also one that realizes that things like housing discrimination is anti-racism, right? Or dealing with anti-racism. Environmental justice is also anti-racism. Food inequality is also related to all this. Employment, right? This is larger web. And, you know, if dealing with racism can be done better from this person's perspective through food justice, great, right? Advocating for the removal of food deserts in our country, that's fantastic. That's one way, right? Anti-racism just doesn't necessarily just involve reading Ta-Nehisi Coates or Patricia Hill Collins, right? Or these amazing Black authors. It's also about dealing with these other offshoots of inequality, right? And how these affect even participation in the SCA. Because like what Zara said, right? If the only jobs that you have are ones that have you working on the weekend, right? And you're in a food desert, then that severely limits the ability to even choose the SCA as a viable hobby. So that, I think, in short, is what a good ally is to me. Somebody that realizes that it's more than just racism. It's about all of the offshoots, right, that come with that.
Systems, again, coming back to those systems.
Yeah.
So, Gigi, you missed the pre-interview, but I have a mentor when I was working in a psychology department, and he talked about, you know, functions of behavior and looking at behavior outside of a vacuum because it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And he said, you know, behavior is the dead man's test. And what it means is if a dead man can do it, that is not a behavior. So relating that to like anti-racism versus non-racism. If a dead man can say, I'm going to say, if a dead man can be non-racist, that is not a behavior. If an ally can say, you know, I'm non-racist, that's not a behavior, that we have to see something behind it. And that is kind of my litmus test for allyship is your behavior on par with a dead man? Because if it is, please don't use the term ally or anything even remotely close to that. And I mean, that sometimes needs to be the bar. And, you know, it's over the show, these kind of, these ally pieces have evolved and, you know, getting to the point where we're stepping up the game. Like it's not enough to be non XYZ, that it's time to be anti and be more than just a body on a slab. So That's
Yeah.
where that came from.
This totally came up like this past, like in the recent history of my life. This came up in a conversation with someone who is probably never going to see this. But there was kind of a discussion of like, hey, are we at a point where we can just get people to not make it worse? Like if you can just not make it worse. And there was definitely a part of me that was like, yes, for the love of God, like just don't make it worse and I will deal. And then I thought about it more and I'm like, why should I lower my standards so much? Like, why should I take all of the labor that I have done and diminish it by saying all you have to do is not unfuck what like, no, you should have to have an active role in making things better. And that can look a lot of different ways, right? Like that is something that we've talked about multiple times. It's something that both of you have talked about tonight. It's something that we've gone in circles, right? But the idea that like, well, what I'll do is I'll listen in and I'll intake all of this information and then I'll just avoid problematic behavior. I'm like, not good enough.
No, it's not. It's not, because if you want something different than you've always gotten, you have to do something different than you've always done. And a lot of people, a lot of good people, I'm gonna go the good bad binary. A lot of people who I like have just floated through.
Yep.
And they haven't made things worse, but they haven't made things better. And that status quo is not acceptable if you want progress. So if you want things to change for the better, then you're going to have to do something different than just float along and not make things worse.
Silence upholds the oppressor.
Yep.
If there already exists a bad system, being silent will not unfuck the bad system. It won't. So
It doesn't.
I'm not going to absolve anyone of the idea that they can just not make it worse and still get in their minds the points, the cookies, the whatever gratification they receive out of that. I'm like,
The tokens.
you don't get right.
Yes.
You don't get this for the bare minimum of just not being actively bad.
And this has to do not just with people who may want to be allies, right, or consider themselves. This also has to do with people of color and how to be anti-racist. There's a section on uplift suasion. And that's basically the idea that to make things better, you be the best version of your Black self possible. And you show people that their stereotypes are wrong because you exist. And that is basically doing nothing. It's staying silent about racism. Don't bring up race. Don't bring up the fact that you're fighting against racism. Just be excellent, right? Make good grades, be on time. All the stereotypes that you know, show the opposite of them. Show that you exist and you are, evidence that they're not true. And Black people tried that for a long time.
Respectability politics doesn't work.
Yep.
It doesn't work.
It does not work.
So even in our own enclaves, even in our own groups, we have to make the decision that we're not just going to stay silent and be excellent and try to disprove stereotypes that way. We're actually going to be anti-racist as people of color as well, and promote anti-racism and demand other people, especially allies, to actively be anti-racist instead of just saying, yeah, just don't make things worse and that's great. You're good. No. It's a little radical for me. Like, I'm a very reserved person. It took me a while to get there. But people who grew up in the 80s and 90s, we tried that. It didn't work.
Yeah. I mean,
we were excellent. Like, people of color were excellent. It did not change things.
Let us not forget of one of the greatest thinkers of American history, Angela Davis, who was the originator of this idea of we have to be anti-racist, right? And that was her saying it in the 60s and 70s, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And the idea of respectability politics, maybe if I look nicer or if I do better by their standards, they'll respect me. They don't, marginalized groups have tried that throughout the 20th century. There was many, there were Jewish groups who tried that in Nazi Germany, and we know how that worked out. So I absolutely, right. And it's this commitment and this social change, right, or this commitment to anti-racism doesn't need to be this big sweeping, I'm going to change national policy, right? It can be small acts, right? I teach, my syllabus in the university is spearheaded by non-white, thinkers and theorists and researchers, right? And that exposes majority white students to these ideas and to these concepts, right? Or, I did only 1 week of in being an interpreter for people seeking asylum in the southern border, right? It doesn't have to be this big, I'm going to hold office type of thing. There's always little moments that we can all do to improve the living conditions and be anti-racist. So, yeah.
And we've talked about, off and on, even the really basic, simple things people can do can be signage at gate, like having your everyone is welcome, whatever version of that looks like, and the anti-bullying, and having that something when someone checks in, hey, did you happen to notice XYZ? This is something that we uphold, something that we value, and this is something that you'll find at this event. And to me, when I see those, so even just taking a walk throughout the neighborhood, when I see signs like that, then I feel safe and I know that someone has my back. And it really doesn't cost very much to have those. And again, it can feel performative depending on if you just slap it up there and walk away. But shit, it's like very minor things, like so minor, that makes such a huge difference. It can be anything from, diversifying the people at, what do you call those, demos?
Right.
It's like small things we can do. And something that came to mind while everyone was talking was the age-old definition of insanity, doing the same thing again and again and again and again for centuries and expecting the same results. Like, we have to step up and do better, and we can do better. People know, we have people who are knowledgeable. We have people sitting on this call who are knowledgeable. My 3 guests tonight, my co-hosts, my guests, people in the chat, we have people who know how to do it. And it's a matter of making those connections and people stepping up and doing the thing. It's hard. And try being, a minority in the United States.
Right.
Like, life is hard.
I mean, you're right though, right? And it reminds me of, I know we have to be done soon, but it reminds me of.
Fine.
Okay. It reminds me of an interview with Samuel L. Jackson about Django Unchained, and the reporter was like, "Why do you use the N-word so much?" And he was like, "What word is that?" And kind of goading the white reporter, say it. And he's like, "Oh, I don't want to say it. And he's like, "Bro, if you say it, that's fine. Because for me, that's just another Tuesday," right? Of this idea of, it's difficult work, right? And it's dealing with these things can be shocking and heavy and emotionally draining. But for many folks, this is just another Tuesday, right? And acknowledging that is an important thing to keep in mind. But hey, it's small things can make it worth it, right? The people have done like pronoun pins, like pronoun pewter pins on their garb, and it looks great. And that's another really small, fascinating, and very, I would say, effectual example of normalizing pronoun usage, right? Or everybody uses pronouns, but it being explicit and intentional about pronoun usage, So yeah, just it's all of that you were saying. And hey, hopefully bit by bit we can continue this momentum, because folks are ready to do it. I can see it. So fingers crossed.
Some of us who have been doing for a long time are tired.
I feel it.
I'm praying for someone else to step in.
But I am heartened by the amount of people. For every person who is like, nah, like whatever, I don't get what you're doing. I don't know why you're doing it. I don't know what this means. For every person that I meet like that or see online that writes things like that, there are like 2 people in the SCA that I know that are posting, no, we need to do better. Like, I am heartened by that. Even though we talk about some of the negatives, right, that we want people to do better. And sometimes those interactions we have with people who may not, who aren't on the same bus as us right now. Hopefully later on they'll get on the bus. It's disheartening but I am heartened by the people who really are ready to work, to be anti-racist, to support me, to have my back, truly. There are so many people in the SCA who are like that. It's just amazing to me.
Well, and we wouldn't stay, right? Again, like we wouldn't stay if there weren't something in this. And I think the communities that we build are, well, at least for me, that's the reason I stay, because I can surround myself with folks who are a little more woke and on the bus than some of the others, and you know, and hopefully pick some up along the way. But I mean, that's why we stay. There's joy in that. There's joy in the camaraderie, and you know, there are people who are doing the work. I'm going to put a shout out for Terra Primaria, because that's what I do, and they've done a crap ton of work since I've started. It's only been like 6 years, but I mean, it really, there are some places who are doing the good work, and sometimes it's just about highlighting it and showing people that it can be done. Because yeah, you're right, it can be very disheartening to witness incidents time and time again, or read the things. Don't read the comments. People watching this, just don't read the comments. You know,
reading the comments is an act of self-care.
It absolutely is. And I'm the first person to say, like, it is really hard. Again, it's like watching a train wreck. And then I get my Haitian spiciness. My Haitian passion starts to bubble up, and I'm like, yeah, don't read the comments. It's not good for your blood pressure. And right, we do see in those sprinkle of comments the people who are like, wait, no, hold up, that's the bullshit, right? And that's why we keep going.
Yeah, for sure. I yeah, that is one of the best ways to put that.
I want to make sure that we touch on everything, that there wasn't anything that we left behind. I mean, of course, I want to talk about immigration, but we're going to save that because
we should save that for another
We can do
time.
part two.
We can do part two. I'm down for part two. But yeah, no, we didn't, in my mind, correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't leave anything that can't be talked about quickly or, you know, in 5 minutes or so. But I mean, we could talk, I feel like we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but today is a weekday. It's a school day, as it were.
Yes.
It's a full night, for God's sake.
Right, exactly. But I really want to thank y'all for doing this work, and not just highlighting me, but this litany of folks before and after me, right, who share their experiences, because this is hard work and emotional work and often thankless work, right? Like Zara, you and I have had countless conversations about how thankless it is to be in your position, but it's very important, and that institutional support means a lot, right? And even if it's just media highlighting folks of color who are really cool and have really interesting experiences and have cool conversations, that's a really important thing. And just having that is, to borrow a term, heartening. So yeah, just thank y'all for having me, and thank y'all for being here. So I appreciate it a lot.
Well, thank you for coming on. Again, for folks that are watching, this is all volunteer. Anyone who comes on this show is bearing it, is putting it all out for display, bringing their authentic selves, in the hope that not only will we reach out to a person of color who could really use some validation and feel like their experiences are genuine. This is also to help our viewers who, you know, need some kind of direction and guidance to get from that. But really, it is for us, by us. That was this space. This is our space to be genuine. I do want to say, surprisingly, we are booked through almost the end of 2022 with guests.
That's awesome.
It's amazing how many people have just contacted me and like, Nina, I saw your show, I want to be on it. And that gives me hope that this is actually doing something. Our viewers are generally in the 30 to 50 white women. So I feel like we're making a dent in our allies and helping put out some good work. So there's that. That was very surprising.
Becky, I appreciate you. Karen, I see you. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Sorry.
Needed to be said.
It had to be said. We have viewers all over the world, which is really, really cool. So thank you for coming on and being a part of this show. Next week, we have, not next week, beginning of November, we have Adrian Russell. Don't know the SAN name because
Sabah.
there we go. So hopefully folks will tune in. I, again, appreciate my co-hosts, Gigi and Jessica. Support for this. I would not have been able to do this alone. And Roberto, we're going to have to do a part 2. We're going to have to talk about immigration.
Super down. Let me know. Happy to do it.
To all the viewers, thank you for tuning in, and find that little tidbit of truth and pass it along. Thank you.
See you, folks.
Thank you, everyone.